Hey Cal fans, and welcome to this week's football film study on California Golden Blogs. This week, just 1 week out from talking about how much our offense struggled against North Texas, we're singing a very different tune after Chase Garbers threw for 357 yards and 4 touchdowns. In this video, we'll see what changed, and we'll talk about how that can help us predict where things will go from here for the offense. If you want to read about the defense and why they struggled a bit in this game against Ole Miss, then you can check out the link at the end of this video as well. Let's start things off by looking at the exact same passing concept that we discussed last week. In my last video, we looked at a concept called the slot fade, where the outside wide receiver runs a short hitch and the inside wide receiver runs a fade behind him. As we saw in that video, against North Texas, Garbers was often hesitant to pull the trigger on the underneath route here, and so with that in mind, we should all have been very happy to see this play. This is a nice on-time throw that reminds us a lot more of the Washington game than it does the North Texas game. So, what changed? Usually when there's a huge transformative shift in a player's performance from 1 week to the next, there's a schematic explanation behind it, and that's definitely true in this case. Now remember that when we played North Texas, they spent most of the game in split safety coverages. From a numerical standpoint, when you put a safety over the top to each side of the field like this, it's going to let you play with a 3-on-2 matchup over these two receivers, and what that really gives you is multiple ways to play coverage. For example, you could play a 2-over-1 structure, where the cornerback and safety both drop and bracket the go route, while the outside linebacker drops under the hitch. Alternatively, you could play a 1-over-2 structure, where the cornerback squats in the flat, a linebacker stays inside, and the safety covers the go route all by himself. The key here is that when you're using 3 defenders to cover 2 receivers, there are multiple ways that you can divide up coverage responsibilities. From the offense's perspective, this means that the quarterback has to diagnose which of these options he's seeing, and this can lead to uncertainty or hesitation. Instead of playing split safety coverages like this, Ole Miss spent most of the game in single high coverages with 1 safety in the deep middle of the field, and they were usually rushing at least 4 defenders. This drastically reduced the number of options that they had in coverage, and in coverages like this, because there's no extra safety playing over the top and no additional defender dropping underneath, the defense is really playing 2-on-2 over these receivers. When the defense is 2-on-2 like this, there aren't that many options for how they can cover those guys. Each defender's truly 1-on-1 with his man, and so there aren't going to be a lot of surprises for the quarterback. This is a situation where Garbers thrived against both Washington and Ole Miss, and we can see here that without any uncertainty about who's covering the hitch, Garbers is free to unload it quickly underneath a bailing cornerback. The absence of a third defender didn't only open up short routes underneath bailing cornerbacks, though. The same basic principle also allowed us to throw deep against these coverages, and this accounted for many drive-saving completions. For example, let's check out this 3rd and 12 play, with Cal running a slant to the outside wide receiver and a corner out behind him. If the Rebels were running North Texas's 8-man split safety coverages here, then this linebacker would drop into coverage instead of playing as part of the pass rush. This would put him in position to cut the slant, and the cornerback would be free to sink under the corner route. Instead of doing this, Ole Miss is rushing that linebacker and spinning to a single high coverage. As we saw in the last play, this puts them in a true 2-on-2 coverage situation up here, and this means that when the outside wide receiver runs his slant, the cornerback has to cover him because there's nobody else who can pick it up. When he does this, however, it's going to pull him shallow into the inside, opening up the deep sidelines for the corner route behind him. Watch here as Hawkins gives a nice inside move to freeze his defender before breaking outside to the sidelines for a critical completion. Indeed, just a few plays later, we again had 3rd and long, and Ole Miss again played us with a single high look. By now, we know exactly how this is going to work. With no safety over the top at the top of the screen here, the defense won't have a lot of options for how to cover this wide receiver. The cornerback has to defend him, and when he does this, that's going to isolate this linebacker here on Chris Brown working out of the backfield. Touchdown Bears. Our RPOs also worked a lot better against Ole Miss's single high looks. For example, on this 2nd and 10 play, we're running a zone read to the right, and Ole Miss is again spinning to a single high coverage. As we've now seen a couple of times, with no safety over the top up here, the cornerback and outside linebacker will be isolated one-on-one on the wide receiver and the tight end. The fact that this is an RPO, however, makes this outside linebacker's job impossible. Remember that on this play, the Bears are running a zone read to the right. On a zone read, that outside linebacker is the last defender on the edge, and so it's his job to stay wide and to defend against the quarterback keeper. Cal's then attacking this responsibility by running the tight end straight past him right down the seam, and this puts that outside linebacker in an impossible position. If he runs with the tight end in coverage, then the quarterback will keep the ball and run around the edge for a huge gain. If he sits wide for the quarterback, however, then this is going to happen. Okay, so now that we understand how coverage impacts our offense's attack, I can leave you with a few things to watch for in the ASU game. For starters, ASU will sometimes run single high coverages, and when they do, they're going to look like this. ASU plays a 3-3-5 with 3 safeties, and so in the passing game, you're looking for them to drop one of those safeties into the deep middle, while the other 2 roll down into underneath coverage. This look will be pretty close to what we've seen against Ole Miss in this video. Their other common look is a nickel version of the Tampa 2. In this look, they'll drop a safety deep to each half of the field, and then they'll use their third safety to defend the intermediate hole between them. This split safety look will put them 3-on-2 to each side of the field, and it'll be closer to what North Texas ran. The positive thing about this coverage, though, is that it's more passive in the box than most of North Texas's stuff, and so there should be space for the run game to get going. At this point, it'll be up to the offensive line to step up, using the run game to force the Sun Devils back into those single high coverages that our passing game has been so effective against this year. Alright, that's it for this week. If you want to know about our defensive performance against Ole Miss, then check out patreon.com/Burke18, where I'll be posting a write-up sometime tonight. Otherwise, I'll see you back here next week, and go Bears!